Hey guys, welcome to the community. So this is going to be a AI mixed with kind of like video production course, I'm thinking. So, and if you're watching on YouTube, there's like, it's a little more organized than school, so you can kind of visit school if you guys want to check that out. If not, you can keep watching on YouTube. I'll try to organize it with playlists and whatnot. So, the AI stuff, I'm still learning as we're going. And then I've been doing video production for over 5 years now. So, and also I've been doing it full time for an extended period of time. So I think it's been like 3 years that I've been doing it full time. So I know a good amount about video. I did like a lot of like special effects and stuff like that. Learned a lot about audio when I was working for like a mega church. So I've got a pretty good understanding, but I'm not going to make this super complex. I'm going to make this fairly easy for anybody maybe just getting started, especially the first couple like lessons or courses I'm going to make are going to be very basic, and then I'm going to get more advanced as we go. So as I get more advanced and as I grow, I'm hoping this community will also grow and get more advanced, and we can kind of like grow a little bit together. I mean, I'm pretty experienced right now, so it's gonna be a little bit of time before we can catch up to the point where I'm like learning new things, maybe. But when we get there, I'm really excited to go and learn new things. And even these like basics and foundations are gonna be great for me to re-practice and revamp. And when you teach somebody, typically you remember a lot better and you become a lot better at it as well. So let's dive in. I'm gonna do my first lesson right now. We're going to go basically exposure, a lesson on exposure. So why exposure is because the camera measures light. So I could put this light source right in front of the camera. Like that's what's measuring. Like if there was no light, the camera would not be able to measure, would not pick up anything. The sensor on the camera would not pick up anything. And then back in the film days, that's like when the shutter opened, the light came through the lens, exposed the film. It's all about light. So I wanted to kind of address that with my first lesson and just the basics of light. And then we'll kind of get into more stuff like audio, maybe how I set up like this really janky kind of studio that I have going on. This is like literally my office space. I didn't have a whole lot of room. So I just set up this real quick studio, but it's really simple to go and just shoot videos. All the stuff I'm going to do today is super easy. I can control it all with like this panel I have over here. So I can go into that stuff more advanced, but you guys just kind of have to let me know what you guys want to learn as we're going along. All right, so let's dive in and kind of learn a little bit about exposures. Here's my little light. I'll set this up over here. And you guys will see that you don't also need a fancy camera like this if you get light right, okay? So this being the FX3, sorry about that. You're not going to need a fancy camera like that. You can use your iPhone. It'll be just fine. But if you can master light, you can make great images out of this. And then you got to master the other almost half, which is going to be audio. So today's about the light, though. The exposure on the sensors of your camera, and your phone has a sensor in it too. So it's basically the same thing as like this camera right here. There are some apps you can download. That's a whole nother video. I'll go into how to shoot with your phone in another video. So again, subscribe or tune into the school community to catch that kind of stuff. Okay. So let's go in and look at my camera. So I'm going to switch over to my camera. That's not the camera. That's a black screen. Okay. This is the camera. So I'm also going to put myself in this little corner here so you guys can still see me. Ooh, that's not a good corner. Let me go to the top corner. Top corner because it's only covering the battery because I was covering some of the exposure stuff. Okay, so most of the stuff we're going to be dealing with is going to be the bottom portion of the screen, okay? So you're going to see, like it says, shutter, and that's the shutter angle. So there's exposure is divided into, let me come back to myself. That's not me. Sorry, there's some kinks. It's been a while since I've done this. But yeah, there's three things we got to keep in mind when we're exposing. There's a shutter speed. There's also something called a shutter angle, which you're going to see on my camera. It does a shutter angle. It's a more cinema-based camera. And then there's a shutter speed. I can kind of go in. I might change the setting real quick as well so you guys can see what a shutter speed looks like as well, because most cameras that are not high-end like this one are going to have a shutter a shutter speed. Yeah, shutter speed, which is going to be like 1/50 or something like that. So at first, here's what you guys need to know about the shutter angle or shutter speed. It could be referred to as either one. The shutter angle is going to be what you see on my camera. It's a more advanced thing. It gets complicated. I can go into a whole nother time. But that is going to be basically the something you're not going to change much. Okay, when you're first starting out, you're going to take your frame rate, which I can go into as well, and then you're going to double that, and that's how you're going to get your shutter speed. So it's going to be 1 over, like, for 23.98 or 24 frames per second, you're going to take that, double it, and if you have 1 over 48, you're going to do that for the shutter speed. If you don't have 1 over 48, find the closest one, which is going to be probably 1 over 50. So for the shutter speed, and you're going to use that basically, and you're not going to change it. Okay, when you're first starting out, it basically does motion blur, and the cinematic motion blur, or like the proper way to do it, is just to basically double your frame rate. Okay, so if you're shooting in 30 frames per second, you're going to be 1 over 60. If you're shooting in, let's say, 60 frames per second, you're going to be 1 over 120. And the higher that number gets, so like the bigger number on the bottom of the fraction, that's going to be the like the darker the image is going to get. So 1 over 1,000 is going to be way darker than 1 over 250. Okay, that's what you kind of need to know. So when you go over to 60 frames per second, that's going to change your exposure and bring the light that's coming in the camera down. So the shutter, like if you're taking a photo and you see like an old camera, it's the thing that goes right in front of the lens, and it's like we're talking about how the fraction of a second that it basically like exposes the image and then covers it back up. Okay, so that's what the shutter speed is. Okay, that's what you need to understand. And it's an angle in video because they had a different mechanism that wasn't quite like a shutter like this that comes down, or they have different shutters even. So that's kind of what you need to know about shutter speed, shutter angle. And then shutter angle, the higher you go in the shutter angle, the more light you actually have. So it gets complicated. So don't worry about shutter angle. If you're using shutter angle, you probably know a lot about it. I'm actually probably going to switch my camera over so you guys can kind of see. So we're going to cut back. Why does it keep cutting to 4? Okay, we're going to cut back to here. I'm going to put myself back in the corner. And then we got Pikachu and a thing of film here. Okay, and I'm going to go into my camera settings real quick. And I'm going to just change to see my shutter mode. I'm going to go in here. We're going to go speed, okay? That's what I was just talking about, shutter angle and speed. Okay, so now we are in shutter speed. So I'm actually shooting, if you look at the very top, almost center, it says 4K 23.98 P, and then there's other options like this. Like Hollywood movies are shot in 23.98. Then you have things like 120, which is like super slow motion. And this is like what you would shoot slow motion in, so you can slow down in post. Sometimes you can slow down in camera if you wanted to, but we're not gonna worry about that, okay? We're gonna say in 23.98. There's also 30 frames per second, which is like news, or like sometimes with YouTube and stuff like that. But we're just gonna say 20, unless you can just be doing slow motion, you can do slow motion. We could make a whole video on that, okay? So we're not gonna worry about that right now. Okay, so I'm shooting that. I want to go 1 over 50th. There's our shutter, and there's a couple ways to adjust exposure on a camera. So we have our shutter speed. You're gonna have your iris or your aperture. So right now that says iris. That's basically my aperture. So it's gonna be f-stops. So f-stops or t-stops if you're again using a cinematic camera with a cinematic lens. This is actually not a cinematic lens. This is like typically cinema lenses, cinema glass is all manual focus, but this is like my versatile lens that I use for photo, and you definitely can use it for video. So if you have a camera, you're probably using f-stops, and that is this number right here. And see, as I also go higher, so there's like, okay, let me just go over reverse a little bit. There's 3 things that change exposure. You have shutter, iris or aperture, and ISO. ISO is like the camera's digital way of, it was like the film sensitivity back in the day. So like how sensitive the film was to light. So that's like how sensitive your sensor is to light. But the higher the number, the more grain or noise you're going to get. And I'll demonstrate that in a sec here, okay? So you see the iris goes down, it's making, or the iris goes up, it's making it darker. So if the shutter speed, the bottom number on the shutter speed goes up, it makes it darker, okay? If the aperture goes up, it makes it darker. And technically, it's the hole that the light is going through. So the higher number is actually a smaller hole the light that's allowing light to go into. Now let me bring up my ISO I was talking about. As we can see, it's becoming brighter now. You might actually see some like weird speckles and like some moving grainy looking stuff. Kind of looks like sandpaper maybe. That is what I'm talking about when I'm saying noise, okay? So the higher ISOs will get noise. This camera handles noise very well. So it's harder to see in this camera. This is like a very nice camera, but like something with a smaller sensor like your phone, you will see noise a lot easier. Okay, there's colored noise, so it's like green and red speckles, and there's just regular noise, which is like it's less noticeable, a little bit more pleasing to the eye. You don't have it's like colorless. So it's the same color as whatever you're shooting. So it's kind of like an overlay in a way, right? So now you can see my door in the background, right? So that's because my iris right here, I was adjusting that up and down. So if I want that like cinematic look, so you want to adjust that all the way down, and see now it's super bright, got to bring this ISO down. See like how I'm changing these things? It's starting to change the exposure, and it's like balancing it out. So there's different ways. With photo, you typically can change your shutter speed too, but video, again, I was telling at the beginning, we don't want to be changing our shutter. I could change the shutter. Let me just go like way down the shutter, okay? Go way up just so I can demonstrate. Oop. See like how jittery it becomes, like super blurry, because that's like what we call motion blur. That's why we don't want to be changing the shutter speed, okay? So you want to keep this at 1/50th. It's gonna make it a lot simpler, so you only have to change two things now for exposure. So now we have our iris and our ISO. Now this gets pretty complicated. Like in a controlled environment like this, so you see Pikachu over here, he's properly exposed. This is something that gets more and more complicated as we go. Like for example, if I were to go outside right now, because this is a very controlled lighting environment, I have all these like fancy lights that I'm using to expose everything. But if I were to go out, let me cut back to myself quick here. If I were to go outside and it's like a bright midday sun in Colorado where I live, sometimes like even raising my aperture up to like the highest aperture, so the smallest hole with the least amount of light in, so like it's like a hole like this big, right? And it kind of closes down because it gets like to a pinhole, right? That's like the highest aperture that we could go, right? Sometimes when you go outside and it's like midday, that's not even enough to reduce the sun. So there are a couple things that we actually have to do. I actually should grab it. It's right in front of the desk here, but I'll grab it in just a sec here. There is a couple things you can do, and it's basically other ways to kind of reduce it without raising the shutter speed. So a photographer can typically raise the shutter speed to make that like how fast it exposes the image on the sensor. They can change that, but you can't as a videographer because you're going to get this very jittery, almost unnatural look to it. When I first started video, I actually did that a lot. I would raise the shutter speed because I was using my iPhone. As I said, you can use your iPhone. So if you don't have a camera, you can get started on your phone. I'll show you that whole other video. The app you can download to kind of allow you to have manual control instead of using auto control on your iPhone. But to go back into what I was saying, yeah, so you can only just aperture, and your ISO can only go so low. Like a lot of times I'm just shooting the lowest ISO because I'm trying to avoid the noise. So how do you, like if you're lowering your ISO all the way down, so the lower number being less bright in ISO, if you're lowering that all the way down to, normally it's like 100, if you're lowering that all the way down to 100 and you're raising up your aperture to like 16 or sometimes it's like 22, like the highest apertures, f-stops that you can get, and that's letting the least amount of light in, and that's not even enough, you're going to have to find something else if you want to keep your shutter speed where it is to have the correct motion blur for the image, okay? So let me show you guys what I have for that. All right, I'm back. So what I use for exposure is something like this, okay? So this is what we call variable ND, which is neutral density filter. And basically it's like sunglasses for your camera. So you can get variable ones, or you get ones that are just set and like they're just one. So like if I hold this in front of me, you can see how I'm a little bit darker already. Now watch this. The variable one, it actually makes me darker as I turn this. So see, you can definitely see that exposure difference here, and it almost reflects that light right there. So this goes on the front of your lens, okay? So this goes on the front of my lens. It just screws on the front here, and you can get this stuff for like your iPhone too. And you can get variable ones if you want the best one for when you're just starting out. Get a variable one. I shoot a lot of weddings, so I need something very quick that's going to be able to change exposure super quick. See? So, because I'm going in the shade, I'm going in the sunlight. So if you're doing a lot of that kind of stuff, definitely get the variable versions. This is a Nisi. It's going to be one of the more expensive versions because I am doing professional work. So I get the more expensive, the higher quality ones, because anything that goes in front of your lens is going to change the quality of the image you're shooting. So honestly, I think I've gone probably more than in depth with this whole deal. I don't think I think I could have made this a couple of different videos, but this is my first one. So hopefully you guys got a lot of value and just learned a lot about exposure from this video. If you guys want to learn some more, give me some suggestions of what you want to learn in future videos, follow along. Just let me know. Let me know in the comments, or DM me, direct message me with stuff that you guys kind of want to learn. I'm super new to school, so if you're on there, do whatever you have to do to get a hold of me, because I'm new to this. I'm going to start building and creating courses and stuff like that within this platform. At first, they're going to be free courses. I'll start talking about AI as well in different videos, and then kind of how I'm starting to integrate AI with video workflows maybe and stuff like that. So yeah, subscribe, join the school community. All be linked in the description for YouTube. If you're already in school, then just like join the course community. I'll be posting stuff, keeping you guys up to date. But yeah, that's it's not as hard as you would think once you get used to exposure. So you just kind of got to go around, mess around with it, and see what the things do. Just remember those 3 different things: the shutter speed, which you're almost never going to change. You just got to double your frame rate, and then the aperture, ISO, ISO being like digital brightness, and then aperture being the lens within the lens, how small the hole is on the lens. If it's wide open, it's gonna make everything very blurry in the background, but then also let a lot of light in. But then when you bring it down, it's going to put more into focus. And that's another thing, like we could talk about focus another day, like basically what's blurry and what's not blurry. And that aperture is going to be how you can control the depth of what is blurry and what's not blurry. So cool. I hope you guys enjoyed. That was my first video. Yeah, I'm a little bit rusty being in front of the camera, always behind it. So hope you guys enjoyed, and yeah, like, subscribe, the whole thing. So.